He's a Wits University graduate holding a degree in BCom Accounting. He previously served as the Chief Executive Officer of the Umsobomvu Youth Fund. He's currently the Chairman of Itala Limited and the National Youth Development Agency. His broad experience serving government-owned agencies gives him the advantage of having insight into opportunities with the public sector. We've invited him here tonight specifically to share insights around what startup entrepreneurs ought to explore to make the most of exploring business opportunities within the public sector. Once again, this is a topic that we chose as an answer to a need that has come out from our hookup dinner community. We all know how many brilliant opportunities there are that exist within the public sector. Often we are under the misconception that those opportunities are only available to a select few. So let's learn a little bit more about how we can make those accessible for us as well. So ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Malose Kekana.
I used to work for government, so I must also add, because the two positions you mentioned are associated with government, but in my productive time, I now have started a private equity fund. We invest in coal, oil and gas, and I also have a company called TriStar Construction, so that's something else that I do. I'm mentioning this not because I want you to tell you what I do, but when I left government in 2009, I was pretty much in, having been doing youth development, I also had to start from scratch. And I didn't have much. And I chose to go back into banking because that's where I came from before I went to government. I used to work for Rand Merchant Bank, RMB Ventures in the private equity, and I decided to volunteer my time in government for quite a long time. So I do have the experience of being a young or a startup entrepreneur. I'm not talking to you from a perspective of some big shot guy. I'm talking about a guy who in 2010 didn't have income for about 2 years. So that's the perspective from which I'm talking. So the frustrations that you have are the frustrations that I have experienced being inside, seeing people that I used to assist, experiencing them, and then going out and experiencing them as an entrepreneur myself. So that's the perspective from which I'm going to be talking to you from. The topic is, but before I say that, I have to say, this is probably one of the most inspiring events I have ever attended in a very long time. And I think we should give a big round of applause for the hookup dinner. And I was asking people that the National Youth Development Agency should put a lot of money in this, because I think, it wouldn't make sense for them not to be associated with in such a magnificent event. And I'm happy to hear that it's going national, and I think even beyond the nation, we should link up and network with the rest of the African young people on the continent. Sometimes in South Africa we used to say, when you go into Africa, they ask you, where are you from? South Africa. I'm going into Africa, as if we're not in Africa. So I think it's something that is really incredible. I didn't know anything about the hookup dinner, but there's a young guy, Andrew, that used to be my colleague at Umsobomvu, and so I just trusted him. That it's, I didn't know anything, I had not read about it, so I just came here purely on the basis of the belief. Where's the belief guy? So, I came here purely on the basis of the belief, So, the topic is about improving access to procurement for small businesses. So, I've got 6 points to make on what my thoughts are. And I'm sure there are many more thoughts. I know that this is a fun event, so it's not a time for long speeches and so on. So I'll just give you some sound bites. And you are all very intelligent people, so you'll be able to extrapolate that which I'm saying. I mean, one of the big issue in terms of the way the topic was framed was about the problem of incumbency. People who get an opportunity and somehow there are no more opportunities being created for young, small, new businesses. But the problem I have with the question is that it's posed purely from the perspective of the public sector. And I don't think the problem, in as far as access to procurement, is a public sector problem. I think it's a business problem, whether it's business driven by government or business driven by large corporates. Because even if you go to big, large mining companies, you'll find that there is a problem of incumbency. So I don't think we should limit the topic purely to government. So why is it that people don't get access to opportunities? I think, I always say, sometimes there's a problem of ageism. And I've experienced it because I was young once. So there is often a perception that so you've got an interior designer or a space planner or marketing and PR and so on, very limited track record. And there's always a problem of ageism. Instead of people looking at, I was listening to one of the young guys with a bag that is going to charge your phone and so on. That in fact sometimes you lose out on innovation by not involving new and young entrepreneurs into opportunities. And that's largely what we deal with often. And obviously also the issue around corruption. So one of the ways, my thoughts are that we need to look at a term limits for service providers, or what I would call service provider rotation, which would then push out the incumbents so that they can chase opportunities somewhere else. And we have sufficient financial intelligence to be able, because there are people who commit fraud, who will, adopt a new persona. I mean, when I used to lend money, there were people who, when they're blacklisted, they would even have a new identity. From Mr. Mkize to Mr. Lamula, but still with a Zulu accent, So the only thing that when we're doing a due diligence, we'll catch up with my Lamula, mean they speak speed. So that would happen, but I think we've got sufficient financial intelligence instrument to be able to detect fraud. But I think introducing term limits is one good way, so that there is service provider rotation. So a person knows I'm in for 3 years and then I must get out, or look at expanding my market to other areas. The second thing, which is from a government perspective as well, is better planning. I mean, we do budgets for 5 years, for 3 years. I don't know why we procure services for 1 year. For example, if we are going to be building a school, let me use technology. If we are going to be building an application, let me use the school because that's much easier. I can relate to that as a builder. I mean, as a Department of Education that you need 20 schools. It takes a year to 2 years to plan for a school, to procure the capacity. As to why you cannot have multiple projects running at the same time, that would then allow different people, because you can't contract my capacity, your capacity, and the next guy's capacity at the same time. There is obviously going to be a need to match, to have a multiple project management capability, which would then make sure there is a match between the service being required and the financial flows. Because obviously with government, liquidity is an issue in terms of how money flows. But if I'm going to build in a school, if I say to you, we're building a school in 2014, but we're going to need a school in 2015, 2016, that means I can give 3 different builders an opportunity at the same time. And then they can start working knowing that in 2015, that's when I'm actually going to be get paid. And by the time they finish that school, because it takes about 3 to 4 years, they'll be moving on to another one and another one. So every 3 years or 2 years, they know they have something. Now what happened is, because it's 1 year, only one person gets, and then because there are issues, the same guy gets, because I'll come to those issues, and it cuts out everybody. But if we were to have a multiple project management capability, where over 3 to 5 years, you can say that there's 10 or 15 providers that have been given this opportunity, it would really help. The third problem is the issue around corruption. You know, incumbency is promoted by public servants seeking a kickback. So I trust her. So I don't want to have a new conversation about corruption with you. So I'm always going to be giving her the job. And that's really one of the big issues why there is no rotation. So one of the things that I think we should move officials around with a maximum of 3 to 4 years from the supply chain function. So that, you know, he knows while the seed is getting a little bit on, move on to HR, you know, or whatever, you know? Because that is a problem. You know, you put, I mean, in fact, there are supply chain people who move from one department to another, you know? And I think part of the problem is that we need to disempower the supply chain position. And people must know I'm in it for 2 or 3 years and I'm going to move out. The fourth point that I'll make is around, let me put it this way, we did research in 2003. We did that research with a World Bank agency where we were looking at supply or procurement and what were the patterns. We found that especially young people, women and black people, both within government and corporates, they tended to only be sought after for low value products. So there was a bias towards that. So stationery, catering, etc. You know? So one of the things that can solve this problem, I was saying to Andrew before I came here, I said, you know, when you come from a poor family and there's 5 of you, a loaf of bread have got 20 slices. So you all know, like 2 in the morning, 2 in the afternoon, but then you've got this bully brother who comes and eats 7. You know? You know, it tells 4 in the morning, 3 later on. And then you, as these 5 children, you start fighting for this loaf of bread. But the problem is actually not only the fact that you ate 6 slices. It's also the fact that you only have a flipping only 1 loaf of bread. So as long as there is going to be this limitation around the scope of services that is procured from new, young, black women-owned businesses, and there's a bias towards low value type of products and services, the loaf of bread is always going to be staying the same. And one of the things, I mean, government has got a 354 billion rand budget. So it cannot be, I don't think that as young, small, this is black and white, young, small, whatever, that we get more than 6 to 7 billion rand. That money must be going somewhere. And the question that we need to be asking, instead of fighting amongst ourselves for the small loaf of bread, has to be, what do we do to make sure that the scope of what is procured goes beyond the normal? We need to have a new normal which goes beyond what we know. So if there's defense products that are required, who says with, you know, I'm sure the guys who are fighting in Afghanistan somewhere, they need your product to power their batteries, you know, or Iraq. You know what I mean? I mean, they're fighting out there, you know, where do they get to plug? You know what I mean? It's not even an option. You know what I mean? But if then the scope of service is going to be young, black, motor, no ways. I mean, this guy, you know what I mean? ISO, kind of like maybe bought it from SABS. But if it's not given an opportunity, and then it goes to IBM or Cisco or whatever, whoever your competitors are, you're never going to get up. So we need to broaden our horizon in terms of the opportunities that we give for young, black, especially women entrepreneurs. So it's not just about stationery and catering. You know? But I must tell you, when I was raising money for the fund I'm running, I'll tell you this. Let me give you an example. So in 2001, when I started Umsobomvu, young black people didn't get money, period. Okay? Period. So I went to banks. I issued a tender. No one responded. I went to all the banks. They said to me, young, black, township, no security. So we decided later on in 2004, because we've been trying to talk to this guy, you know what, to hell with these guys, we're going to do it ourselves. And then suddenly they started seeing a young black guy owning a Nino's in front of Main Street and seeing a young black guy running a filling station. And suddenly they started entering the market. So that's the kind of perception that needs to continuously be fought against. My last 2 points around policy. I'm happy we've got a black African minister, I'm sorry. But I hope he understands my shit, where I come from. So if there's one big ups for President Zuma would be that, in my lifetime, I've got a black African minister. Hopefully I understand. So here's my beef. Here's my beef. Was that there's something called Preferential Procurement Policy Framework Act, triple PFA. Right? Very long, I think. It was changed somehow before the BE Act was changed. And then it started to value price and functionality above empowerment. So if you had lower functionality, Motra with an unproven solar battery or, no, not battery, fabric or something, I don't know, like microwave or something like that. Somebody who's got a functionality that is proven, and obviously because they've been in business for a long time, they'll have the economies of scale to price it lower. That was awarded 90 to 80 points, and empowerment between 10 and 20. And then it was said, for certain designated products, those, yes, you could prefer empowerment, which is like supplying clean stuffs, right? Nonsense like that, okay? And I had a very big problem. I worked with the BBC. I took the minister then on this. But in any way, the regulation was passed. And that's one regulation we must fight. And we mustn't flinch that fight. Because as long as it doesn't change, empowerment is valued at 5%. One of my first businesses when I was 23 years old was a Kaya car rental. So I've been mobilizing and panding, for quite a while. And how can I compete on price with AVs? I was always out. Then fortunately there were guys like London Grove, I remember People's Bank. He just gave me his own thing, right? But if I was to go to ESCOM, I would never win unless there's somebody who feels my pain. So this law has to change because it entrenches existing businesses which by definition are white or run by old people, right? Because it's mostly old people who are doing BE deals where they're not the operator. Because they're political, we don't do BE, we run businesses. We start our own shit and we run it. Right? So I don't want to buy 25%, I own my own thing. Right? So as long as this happens, it's always going to be the existing old businesses that are going to be entrenched. Let me end by being a little bit controversial. Against you now. I've been against government. Now I'm turning against you. Black brothers, white women, sisters, whatever, whenever you're small, plan for rainy days. Okay? Plan for rainy days. I've seen guys that we've given work to. And there's nothing wrong with this polo. And then nothing wrong. Nothing wrong with this polo, nothing wrong with this test. And then you give him a contract. Now you meet the brother, he's putting his pens here. He's changed from KWV to single malt whiskey, from drinking JC Leroux to drinking Moe and Verve. Plan for rainy days. You're always never going to be getting the job. And sometimes you give people a job to give them the leg up and then what they do, they come up, instead of using that as a platform to go on to bigger things, you know what they do? They spend it. They don't invest in their businesses. And they go, the government is not giving us enough work. We gave you work. You spend the money. You should have gone and bought a KFC franchise or something like that. Because business, if you are depending on procurement, this cash flow is always going to be cyclical. So you need to be thinking, if I'm in the cyclical IT business, which is tender-based, I need something that is a little bit more stable. Maybe I need to buy a filling station or something like that. Or maybe I need to invest in my friend's business and take a 25% stake in this business, because when I'm losing money and I'm not getting procurement opportunities, at least I've got a consistent dividend flow that is going to keep me going. But you know what we do? We go and buy cars. Remember, when Ford started cars in 1906, they are making, as we sit here, they'll still be making, secure your future, save your money, and make sure that when the rainy days come, you are ready for them. So, that is the one thing that kills us, and then the dependency on one client. If you've been given one client, make sure that that one client has opened the door for you. Now you don't own me. Don't come back all the time. Because that's when then you say, well, because I don't want to work hard enough, I must bribe him so that I can keep him. Alright? So, whilst there is a problem with our procurement system, I think there's also a problem with the fact that people have got minds where they don't think beyond today and plan for the rainy days. So, those are my thoughts in terms of what we can do around procurement. I'm sure there's 15 other or 30 other ideas, but I was speaking from my experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you.